All right. So thank you everyone for joining the first installment of the Hub Tupperware sessions. There's going to be two sessions for this session. This is the first one. And then the other one is another time tomorrow or later today for some of us. Our topic for today is performance-based learning strategies. The Tupperware sessions will cover many different topics that are relevant to our work. For this installment, we have decided to talk about a topic within the area of learning management. My name is Sam. For those who do not know me, I support the hub in the area of learning management, and with me helping me manage the session today will be Danny and Andrea, also from the hub. You feel free to interact with them on the chat because I may not be able to follow the chat as I'm presenting the slides. I will be facilitating and leading this session today. 1 hour, and we've consumed 5 minutes already. Next. All right, just some reminders. We are going to use the Wordly app for translation if you want to see a transcript of what I'm saying in your own language. Next, feel free to use the chat to share insights and ask questions. We encourage everyone to use them as much as you want. And then we will also be, we'll go through, we've divided the session into 4 parts, and we'll go through them quickly, each part, but we've allocated the end of each part for us to discuss. So we will answer questions during those section breaks. And if you want to speak, please use the raise hand button, and we'll try our best to track them on the screen. And finally, it's not on the slide. Just a reminder that this is a safe and creative space for learning and collaboration. All ideas will be heard, and all opinions will be treated with utmost respect. All right. Our session objective for today, we only have one, and it is we hope that at the end of the session, we will all be able to identify strategies for motivating or sustaining effective on-the-job behaviors using a performance support plan template, which we will be going to share with you later in the session. These are the parts of the session. The first part is the opening, which we are doing right now. The next part will be a presentation of the key concepts for discussion. The third part will be a chance to look at a resource that we've created, and we hope that it will help us think through how we can apply the key concepts to our different contexts within RARE, and maybe even outside of RARE. And then finally, we'll close the session with a feedback survey and some reminders. Any questions before we move to the next part, where we will talk about the key concepts? Right? Silence means no questions. All right, let's move to the next part. Okay, let's start the next part with a question. Why do we conduct training? Okay. Why do we train people, or why do we participate in training activities? I'm inviting everyone to share your ideas on the chat box, or feel free to unmute and speak. Right. Some people have shared on the chat. Pursuit of excellence. Ooh, very lofty. And build, we have build capacity to transfer knowledge, skills, technologies, build knowledge, supporting other people. No one else? All right, that's good. Thank you very much for sharing your ideas. They're all great answers. Um, let's move on to the next slide. Here is a, let me just, all right, here is a, here's a table that illustrates some of the key concepts that we'd like to share with you today about performance-based learning. In this discussion, we look at training as the safe, controlled, and usually formal space where we build knowledge through the input of new information, and where we also build skills by demonstrating effective ways of doing things. And that's what people have already shared in the chat as well. But we don't just build knowledge and skills for the sake of building knowledge and skills for its own sake. We do it because after training, we expect learners to adopt effective behaviors when they are back in their work or in their daily life in general. So, and that's outside the context of the more structured training activities. And this is what performance-based learning is all about. Performance-based learning is a learning approach where we connect specific learning content and activities to what learners are expected to perform or to do when they are back in their work. So what this is also telling us is that a good practice for training design is clarifying our performance objectives first before we even start thinking about training content. The question we ask ourselves is, what do we expect our learners to be able to successfully do or perform after the training when they are back in their work? And the answer to that question will help us calibrate training objectives because then we can focus only on learning concepts and tasks that are required for learners to perform specific behaviors after the training. And lastly, there is a very interesting dynamic between training managers and people managers. In most cases, during training, the accountability usually lies on training managers because they're the ones who design and deliver the training activities so that we are able to build knowledge and skills. After the training, however, when learners are back in their work, the accountability shifts to people managers because they're the ones who are tasked to support and track the performance of expected behaviors outside of training. And this transfer is also what educators often call the learning transfer. I think someone mentioned the word transfer earlier in the chat. Learning transfer is when learners are able to apply to the real world what they have learned from the more structured training route. So learning management and performance management, therefore, are a collaborative project between training managers and people managers. Here is an image that many of us, if not all of us, have seen at least once in our life because behavior adoption is an important strand of the rare's DNA. May I invite one or two amazing, courageous, wonderful people to tell us what they know about this image? You can share your idea on the chat or or just unmute and speak. Anyone?
Sam, as in the behavior levers.
Yes.
What about them?
Yes, Bernice, since you already are speaking, tell us about this image, like the behavior levers and what they are.
What not about them, Sam?
Thank you, Bernice.
The levers that we use to promote, or I guess to enable certain behavior. So like in Fish Forever, you have these six like, I mean, I'm just gonna keep calling them levers of behavior because that's what they really are. But my favorite is choice architecture. I don't know what to say. What do you what do you want me to say about behavior levers?
That's it. No, like it's just like how you understand it or how you use it in your work.
Oh yeah. So when it's designing like a, let's say like a program, or I mean, okay, fine, like a training, we can use these six behavior levers to promote certain kinds of behaviors that we want, for example, our participants to follow or to adopt, whether it's before, during, or after the session.
Yay! Thank you, Bernice. Does anyone want to share something else about the behavior levers? From the chat, Claudia is saying that they work best when used in combination. So behavior levers combo. Okay. We're not, I mean, this is not the topic for discussion. I just wanted to show you this because this is a lot of people are, in fact, maybe even all of us at Care are familiar with it because this is core to our mission. And basically, the levers of behavior change are strategies that we can use to motivate or to create enabling conditions for behavior adoption to happen. In your copy of the presentation, there is a link below it. You can check it out. It's an entire resource from the B Center about the levers of behavior change. Calixto is saying some of us are very good at only some of them. Yes, that's why we need to collaborate and work with others because what we're not good at, other people are good at. So teamwork makes the dream work. All right, I'm going to show you something similar. This is a portion of a training framework called the Kirkpatrick model of training evaluation. We're not going to talk about the entire model. We're only going to talk about this specific part of that framework. And it's strikingly very similar to the levers of behavior change in many ways. One, it's a circle. Both of them are circles. Second, it explicitly calls out behavior at the center of the circle. And here, by behavior, we mean on-the-job behaviors that we expect learners to perform after the training. On the outermost circle here, you have the words monitor, reinforce, encourage, and reward. They are what the model calls required drivers. They're called required drivers because they are strategies that help drive or motivate or sustain the performance of expected behaviors after training. So in a way, we can look at these as levers of behavior change in the context of performance management after training. A closer look at the required drivers. Here is a list of examples for each of the required drivers. When we look at the list, we can see that it's easy to draw parallels between the levers of behavior change and the Kirkpatrick model in that both frameworks identify strategies for creating an enabling environment for the adoption of more effective behaviors. For example, in the For example, follow-up modules and refreshers can be like the liver of information. Executive modeling could be social influence. Correct me if I'm wrong, behavior adoption experts in the room. Coaching and mentoring could also be social influence, but they could also hit at emotional appeals, right? When you're coaching people, you use the emotions of your coachees to motivate behavior. A reward can be material incentive, or it could also be emotional appeal if the reward is more internal. And then accountability measures such as work plan monitoring, KPIs, touch bases. They could be rules and regulations to some extent. A dashboard could be both choice architecture, for example, or social influence. When you see other people performing well on the dashboard, you're also encouraged to perform equally well as your peers. So those are just some of the parallels I can point out between the behavior levers and the required drivers that this model is using. There are a couple of perspectives we can highlight from this. First, training is essentially a behavior adoption project. We train people because we want them to adopt more effective behaviors after the training. Second, training is not always the solution to poor performance. Sometimes we see a scenario where people are performing poorly and they are immediately sent back to training. After the training, they still perform poorly anyway. And in many cases, it's not because they're not knowledgeable or they're not skilled, but sometimes it's just because they do not receive the required drivers or the performance support interventions that they need outside the training room. So when it comes to this area of training, of our training projects, we ask ourselves, do people need training or do they need performance support instead? So that's it. These are the key concepts that we wanted to share with you today. In the next part of the session, we'll show you a resource that we can use to think through how we may be able to apply these key concepts to our different contexts within RARE. But before that, I'd like to hear from you. Any questions or insights? No questions. Ready to practice. Okay. If you're still thinking through it, then we'll just move through to the next part, which is an example of how this is applied in a specific context, and then we'll pause for another round, another time to ask questions and share insights. Okay, this is an example of a performance support plan that the team in Siargao, Philippines, the Fish Forever team in Siargao, Philippines, created recently for a training project for community educators. And you can see here a table, and you will see this later on in the worksheet. This is an exact table from the worksheet where they identify the learner group, and then they also specify the performance objective. Like if you look at the second column, it says behavior. These are the specific things that are expected of the learners after the training. And so this is sort of the goal of the training. The goal of the training was to build knowledge and skills so that they can effectively perform those two behaviors that are specified in the second column. And in the rest of the table, you will see how, to Claudia's words earlier, how they're combining different strategies, different performance support strategies to create that enabling environment for people, for the learners to perform the specified behaviors. So for Reinforce, they've identified the Fish for the Savings Club's manual. So it's a manual, it's a book that they gave to the trainees so that when they forget certain ways of doing things or certain concepts, it's within access to them because they have that manual. And then they also wanted to build opportunity to observe Savings Club's meetings so that they can observe how it's done. And then they're also using a messenger group chat. This is like a WhatsApp group where everyone is in there to talk about many different things. Initially, they just used the chat to for logistics, like for arranging like the training invitations, the logistical preparations for the training. And then eventually, because everybody was already in that group chat, they're also using it for many different things. And you can see that they're using the messenger group chat as a reinforcing strategy. It's also used as an encouraging strategy, maybe because they share what they're doing in the group chat. And then they also use it for as an accountability or monitoring strategy. And then for encourage, they decided to use mentoring from rare staff and more experienced people during site visits. And then for reward, they have swags. And then they've also identified a more internal reward, like an internal motivation, which is that belonging. Like when they're part of that community educators group in the community, they feel like they get pride from it because like it's a highly visible group of volunteers. And then for monitoring, they're also using touch bases during site visits or mentoring sessions. So there are many ways to combine your strategies. And then after this format is basically just a way to help you think through those strategies. And then once you've identified them already, you can already include those activities in a bigger work plan that your team is using. And what it does is that it already aligns your work plan activities with your post-training activities, which means that your work plan activities are helping create the conditions for your learners to perform well, what we expect them to perform well. So that's it. Thank you to Chris and Janice. I think Chris is with us today in this session for giving me permission to use this as an example. All right. You will, if you have a copy of the presentation, this is there. Everything is there. So now we're going to give you 5 to 10 minutes to look at the worksheet. And if you want, you can start writing on it. Maybe you might want to think about an upcoming training or a recently completed training activity that you want, and then you might want to just go through it in writing, or you can just look at it and think about it. So let's do 5 minutes and then we'll discuss after. All right. So this is how the worksheet looks like. I'm sharing my screen. So this is the same table that that I showed you earlier, but it was already a filled in table from Chris and Janice. So just go through it and read it and see. And maybe you can start thinking through it. Thinking through an upcoming training using this framework. All right. Let's see. How is everyone doing so far with the worksheet? If you have questions, you can feel free to throw them on the chat or just just unmute and speak. Anything that's unclear or any challenges you're seeing with how to use it? Yeah.
I have a question.
Bernice, yes.
What are other ways to encourage behavior? And what's like the difference between reinforce and encourage?
What's
Or
the
do all
difference
of
between?
them do all of them have to have like, let's say, this, do all the support buckets have to be filled in? Or how does it, like, I'm trying to think of
Yeah.
what to put in encourage. I don't know. Aside
Right.
from coaching and mentoring.
Yeah, that's okay. So, like, let me answer like one question. Do we need to fill in all the columns? The answer is no. So it depends on how your learners are currently performing. If your performers, sorry, if your learners are already performing well, then you probably don't need to do anything else anyway, right? You just probably need to sustain it through check-ins, maybe, like, because they're already performing well. But if your learners are performing poorly, then you might want to think about what what strategies could motivate them to perform. And it's going to be different in across contexts. But the answer to the question is you don't need to fill them all out. In fact, if you have a lot of them, it will become very unmanageable. You also have to think of the workload on your end, right? If you're managing it. So you cannot like it's good if you have all those things, but practically speaking, it will become very unmanageable if you have a lot of things there. So just choose the ones that are, what do they say? Like the few things that do most of the work. So
Okay.
it's a strategizing there on our part as well. And let me just say this too. Your objective here is to eventually not use them, right? Because like, so your objective is as time goes by, you should also be weaning, like you should be also using less and less of them, because that means then that your learners are already starting to perform. So then you start how do you do it? Decreasing the amount of performance support you're giving because they're already performing. So you need to just so again, that depends on like the way they're performing. But the ideal scenario really is when you don't need to use any of them, because that means that your learners are already doing what you want them to do. So you don't need to support them with anything major anymore. And I think another thing to share so would be find ways that you are already using. Like, for example, work plan monitoring is something we already do. So like that's something we can, because that's something we do, we can leverage that. We can leverage that to sort of just make sure that the work plan is monitoring performance. Or I don't know if like any, I think the idea also is to just leverage any existing practices that you have so that you don't add more work to yourself.
Thanks, Sam.
Welcome. Thank you, Bernice, for asking.
Chris just is raising his hand, Sam.
I can't see it. Yes, please.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, Mr. Chris Lomboy, loud and clear.
Thank you so much for acknowledging. Sam, so I think there are two perspectives to this. I mean, I understand that, we're trying to use this for performance improvement, but I can also see a kind of application, just like what the Sargao team did. In the beginning, you can already set a kind of levers that you're going to be using at different categories, so that you're already prepared in terms of following up and making sure that the learners are able to perform what is expected of them. So I guess we can stage it in different phases of the learner's journey. So we can start with the beginning. I feel like we can still use the framework, and then as we actually observe and monitor them, and then post evaluation of their performance, then we can go back to the matrix and then say, all right, this one worked, this one didn't, this one we need to upgrade. I feel like it becomes a tool again also for the evaluation of the trainers on how well they've been able to use the different levers that they put together in the beginning, when they began the training program or the performance improvement program. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like it has multiple application rather than just looking at performance monitoring and evaluation.
Yes. Thank you, Sir Chris. It makes sense, and I couldn't have said it any better. Thank you very much for sharing that insight. That's true. I agree. We don't have to wait after the training to implement performance support strategies. We can already start implementing performance support strategy. Actually, anytime we need them. And I think to add to what Chris just shared, like this helps us already, how do you call it? Encourage performance or build that the environment for people to perform even way before the training starts, like when we're still planning for the training. So thank you, Sir Chris. Can you establish some kind of performance compliance levels in the framework? Can you tell us more about it, Calixto?
I mean, if you want to measure some kind of performance in the compliance of this framework, how do you know when you are changing a behavior, or you want, or when you establish what area you need to support, or how you have to do the accountability in the framework? Do you we can establish some kind of compliance levels or checklists when you say I have done this and I have success in this, or it's just a framework to guide you, or you can use this as a monitoring tool?
Yes, thanks, Calixto. That's a very important element of the framework, and one that we did not include in the key concepts because we don't have a lot of time. But Engels is sharing something that answers um, that question, I think. Engels, you wanna talk about performance indicators?
Uh, yes, Sam. So I wanted to say something after Sir Chris' remarks, and which is also connected to what Calixto seems to be raising. So, uh, Sir Chris said, in this process, we need to know what works and what doesn't work. And Calixto is saying, could we have some type of a checklist or by which we know who is complying or with a certain like performance standard in every training that we do. So I think what would help is like not after having the framework, we also have indicators of by which we could measure if someone is, or let's say how compliant someone is to a certain performance standard, or for a certain competency. In other areas, it would be called like competency framework. But that may be too big. But not it won't hurt looking into it and trying, some elements of having a competency framework, which would include performance indicators, could be qualitative in the form of rubrics, could be quantitative, but we'll be doing some hair splitting with that. So having that kind of like indicators or like levels, compliance levels, would give us a way of seeing how much the people we're trying to train are improving. But the other part, the learning part, which Sir Chris seemed to touch on, is uh, also understanding why certain training methodologies work or doesn't work. And I'd also like to link it to the next level of the Kirkpatrick model, which is the results or the outcome. So I think one of the reinforcing element too is that, so after checking that, okay, so the people that we train, they can do these things like step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in establishing a functional savings club, or being an effective facilitator. They're able to demonstrate elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But after that, it may be also worth mentioning, and I believe this has been discussed when you're creating your model. Yeah, the result. Thank you, whoever is showing the screen. So the
Yeah, go
result is
ahead.
also good to feed back to them, like, so, because there could be instances where you have ticked all the, let's say, performance indicators 1 to 5, but then when you ask the participant in the training that that person conducted, it's no, it's not up to our satisfaction, or not as high as we want to. So that's where learning would come in. So we need to investigate what happened, what seemed to work, what doesn't work with the target audience of the further capacity building activities. And so it's maybe just also good to note that checking on the results and feeding back that results to the people that we train, so that they could also assess for themselves if they're really being effective facilitators, or if the savings club that they built are really functional to their satisfaction, to the satisfaction of the savings club beneficiaries, and also the program implementers.
Yay! Thank you, Engels. Um, this is amazing. I did not expect we would go this far in the discussion. But since Engels already, and I think we still have time, since Engels already mentioned the bigger part of the Kirkpatrick model that we're using. Let me just show it to you very quickly. We're not going to do this in detail, but this is just to answer Calix's question as well. If you see this illustration here, this is where this was the scope of the session today, like level 3 and 2. We just wanted to talk about learning transfer, how training should translate into effective behaviors afterwards. But what Engels was already hinting at is like an extra level, which is already the results level. And to your question, Calixto, so on the case of the learners, as Engel said, we can use performance indicators, and it could be just a simple checklist of like the things they need to do, and then you just check them on this one. This person has done it, and then you can add some rating if you want. And there are many ways to do that, but performance indicators is one way you can track your learners. Another way of tracking it is when you look at the results of results, meaning what are indicators that you are achieving the results of your the target results of your program. For example, if the behavior is to help form savings clubs, if you would just be consistent with the example, then if you can see that in your monitoring plan there are already so many savings clubs that are working well, and like people are establishing savings clubs, that is already an indicator that your learners are probably performing really well, because like there's already a lot of savings clubs being formed, they are functional, they are meeting regularly, and those are like results indicators that will tell you that that your learners are already performing because they're achieving results already. So that's another one. So performance indicators and results indicators. I just wanted to show you that we are already we are in the bigger how do you call it, picture. The discussion is now in the bigger picture. Calixto, I hope that sort of answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Gracias. And then we have a chat from Rocky. Seems that in the savings clubs, example, there is an overlap between the training of the organizers and the goal of having them set up clubs and the actual performance of the savings clubs. Yes, not a bad thing, but it's an example of an learning and these strategies overlap. Yep, and also I think the nuance to the example, let's just go back to it. The nuance to this example is that this is an ongoing project for community educators, and I think we don't really have I would say we don't have hard expectations from the volunteers because they're not our direct implementing partners. So we were still exploring what kind of support they would most likely be effective at. And so the behavior there is also not too specific. It just says support the establishment of functional savings clubs. And there are many ways they can do that. And I think the Siargao team is already experimenting on a learner performance tracker. They've started doing it, and after that, I think we will be able to sort of look at the more specific ways that these volunteers are supporting the setting up of the savings clubs, because the setting up of the savings clubs are, I mean, strictly speaking, it's not their responsibility. We're just it's the responsibility of the implementation team, both from RARE and the implementing partner. So the community educators are just there to sort of help, and we're still trying to find those specific ways they're helping. It could just be, I don't know, doing the orientations or helping with logistics. There are many ways they're doing it. So it's just wanted to add that there too. All right, we have 1 more minute. Let's just thank you very much for all your questions and all the insights. We have unexpectedly, at least for me, dove in deeper to this thing, which makes me very happy. And this is just a parting insight I'd like to share. And this is from an article that that the link to that article is at the end of the presentation, of the copy of the presentation that we shared. It says the finish line is performance and not learning. So like the target, our goal is for people to perform and not just for people to learn. And then we would like, because we're at the end of the hour, we would like to ask everyone to take this very short, it's probably going to take you less than a minute to take this session feedback survey. Danny has dropped the link to the survey on the chat box. Basically, there's just like 3 required questions. Check, you just need to check them, and then 2 optional open-ended ones, so we know how we can improve our future Tupperware sessions. Right, and then at the end of the presentation, you will have a list of resources that you can check when you have the time. The worksheet is there. There are a few articles and a few videos that are related to the discussion. Thank you, everyone.
We're so glad to have you in our
Thank
first
you.
Tupperware.
Job,
We
Sam.
expect you to do
Danny.
the
Thank
rest.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Nos vemos.